This is Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast, with your hosts, Brandon Spinner and Michael Burns.
And welcome into Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast. I am Brandon alongside Michael Burns. We are going to be doing our top 10 power rankings here. This is week 14, coming out on Monday, July the 3rd. This is going to be a YouTube exclusive from now on. You can only find that on YouTube. We've had a lot of shakeup at the top, even in the last 4 days since our last power rankings. But going forward, we're going to find these rankings only on Mondays on YouTube. So that's where you can find us. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button below before we get started, and follow us for more content on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can find a regular podcast not only here on YouTube, but also on Spotify, Apple, as well as Stitcher, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio Podcasts, and Amazon Podcasts. With all that being said, you can see I'm dressed up in my work attire. Mikey, how are you doing tonight?
Yeah, what's up, Brandon? I've got my American flag Cub shirt on. Got stars on one sleeve, stripes on the other. Pulled out every year. But yeah, let's get into our power rankings.
Let's do it.
I do have a new team in my top 10, but otherwise not too big of a shakeup, as this is our transition period in between going from our regular episodes to Mondays for our power rankings. But yeah, let's get right into it. At number 10, I've got the Cincinnati Reds. They dropped one spot. They did lose the series to the lowly Padres, who look like they will be sellers at the deadline. But yeah, other than that, the Reds are dropping one spot for me.
My number 10 team, the Miami Marlins. They're falling from 6 last week all the way down to 10. They just got swept by the Braves this weekend, losing 16-4 on Friday, looking hapless. On Saturday, gave up 6 runs in the first inning, losing 7-0, and Sunday getting swept 6-3. That team has one of the worst run differentials in the league. I've been talking about that for the last couple of weeks. Really didn't believe in this team, but the way they were playing, they were still winning close ball games, so they were climbing up the power rankings. Hard not to do that when they had won 5 in a row and had a very good month of June. But the last 3 days, getting swept by the Braves, who showed them they're their daddy, frying the fish. The Marlins down to 10 for me. They have the 9th worst run differential in baseball, even though they're in the top 10 in records. So that just shows you what this team has kind of just been lucky to be where they're at.
At number 9, I've got the Miami Marlins. They dropped 3 spots. They were 6 last week for me, but they did get smoked by the Atlanta Braves. I mean, I really can't blame the Marlins. But that did put their record down lower to drop them enough, 3 spots. But yeah, they're my number 9 now, Miami.
In 9 for me, the San Francisco Giants falling down a little bit. They had been on a very hot streak climbing up the standings, but they're 4-6 in their last 10. They've lost a couple of games in a row. They don't look as dominant as they did in their hot streak. Still near the top of that standings in the NL West, but they are falling down 2 spots for me this week.
My number 8 is the same as last week. It's the Dodgers. Their record is a little bit better than Miami, but man, they nearly got swept by the Royals. They lost a 3-game series, 1-2, and that's never a good look whenever you get swept by the Royals.
In 8th, I had a hard time moving this team up, but with the fact that the Marlins dropped for me, I had to go with the Phillies jumping up to 8th. They're doing this after sweeping the Cubs last week, but they did lose 2 of 3 to the Nationals over the weekend, despite outscoring them, similar to what the Angels did a week and a half ago versus the Rockies. They did pour it on them on Saturday, 19-4, and the Phillies have been playing very good baseball as of late, 7-3 coming into this week. They've been looking as a better team the last few weeks, so that's why I have them up to 8.
My number 7 is the same as last week again, not much of a shakeup. It's the San Francisco Giants. They are ahead of the Dodgers because they didn't lose their series to the Royals. They only lost their series to the Mets. We really had not very many series wins in the top records of MLB, but still not much movement because of that, just because we're on a short week.
In 7th place, I have the Astros jumping up in the standings from 10th last week to 7th this week, really because they just beat one of the best teams in baseball over the weekend and taking 3 out of 4 versus the Texas Rangers, who have the best run differential in all of baseball. When you're able to do that against a divisional opponent, that makes you jump up. Even though the record over the last 10 isn't quite as impressive, they just had an impressive series over the weekend, and that vaults them up the standings.
My number 6 is my new team into my top 10. They move up 9 spots, and that's the Houston Astros. They came in and took the series from Texas. That's a big. I think the scores are up there, and I just wonder: are we sleeping on Kyle Tucker? Kyle Tucker is looking like more of a monster than I think we give him credit for.
In 6th place for me, the Cincinnati Reds. We've been talking about this team for the last several weeks, how young and exciting they've been. They continue to pile up series victories. The only loss in their last 8 was against the Atlanta Braves, who is one of the best teams, if not the best team in baseball right now, and they had a very competitive series against the Braves. So the Cincinnati Reds come back home. They beat the Padres this weekend, 2 out of 3, salvaging that series, and they are now up to 6th in my standings.
My number 5 is the same from last week. That's Baltimore. They lost their series to the Twins this weekend. Again, another top 10 series loss.
Sitting in 5th this week is the Orioles. That's where I had them last week, and we're kind of chalk from here on out. Not a whole lot of movement in my top 5. The Orioles were 5th last week. They're still one of the better teams in the AL East. They did lose 2 of 3 this weekend to the Twins. They lost by 8-1 on Friday, 1-0 on Saturday before salvaging Game 3 on Sunday. They still have a very good team. They've still got a young team, and they're near 50 wins right now. This is a good team in that AL East, and if they could start to get some contributions from some of those players who have been struggling as of late, I still think that they're a top 5 team in baseball right now.
My number 4 is the same as my number 4 from last week. Again, it's Texas. They did lose to that series to Houston. Fun series to watch. But they did add Aroldis Chapman now to their bullpen, so now they have the stout offense. They add a weapon, and I don't think Chapman's even going to close for him. I think he's just their setup man to Will Smith, their closer. So that just bolsters that Texas team. But they're still my number 4.
In 4th place, I stick with the Arizona Diamondbacks. They took 2 of 3 over the Angels this weekend, a big series out in L.A. They did it out on the road. They're still 4-6 in their last 10 games, but they played better baseball over the weekend. They still lead that NL West. Overall, one of the best teams in baseball as of late, and they've got an MVP candidate right now with Corbin Carroll, who's likely to win NL Rookie of the Year, unless Ellie has something to say about it later on.
My number 3 is the Arizona Diamondbacks. They are in front of Texas because they won their series. They are one of 2 teams that won their series in my top 10. So that keeps them in front of Texas, even though they have similar records. But you win your series, you get to move up.
Sticking with the Texas Rangers at 3 for me, even though they did lose 2 of 3 over the weekend versus the Astros, and with that wraparound 4-game series, they did lose Game 4 today versus the Astros on Monday. Still, they played a very good team there. They've been one of the best teams in baseball, and really, I'm not going to let one weekend change my mind, especially when they have the best run differential in all of baseball.
My number 2 is the same as last week as well. It's the Tampa Bay Rays, who lost their series to Seattle this weekend. You got to beat the good team. The good teams have to beat the bad teams, and that's how you make it playoffs.
And as you saw last week in our podcast episode, you saw that the Tampa Bay Rays were my second team for the first time this year, and that's where they still sit in this week's Power Rankings. They still have one of the best teams in baseball, 5-5, but they are on a 2-game losing streak coming into Monday. A plus 157 run differential actually is better than the Rangers that I was just talking about, but coming into today, that wasn't necessarily the case. They were tied at plus 155. As far as the top team in the league, they are just a few percentage points behind the Braves, as the Rays have the most wins in baseball right now at 57. And again, they have scored some of the most runs in baseball. The Texas Rangers at 505 have the most, and then behind them is the Rays. So that's why the Rays are still my second team right now in the top 10.
And the number one in my power rankings, freaking Atlanta Braves, man. They are something special, and I've got to believe they are the favorite to win the World Series right now.
And last but not least, Braves fans, you're happy right now. The hottest team in Major League Baseball. 8 wins in a row. They've got 9 out of their last 10, and before that, they were on a long winning streak before losing 1 game to the Reds. They are the best team in baseball right now. They're firing on all cylinders, and they still have some injured pitching right now. This team is strong top to bottom. Hard not to go with them as the best team. They have the best run differential right now in the National League, and also they have the highest winning percentage right now. It's .675 with a record of 56-27. So your number one team in Brandon's Power Rankings this week and in Michael's Power Rankings this week, the Atlanta Braves. And that has been a Week 14 recap of Barrels and Barrels, the Bourbon and Baseball podcast. Top 10 power rankings here in the major leagues. You can always look for this every Monday right here on our YouTube page at Barrels and Barrels Pod. This is the only place you can find it, but if you want to find our podcast, you can find that on Spotify, Apple, as well as all the other places that you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening. And then, Mikey, you got any last words for our friends and viewers?
Happy 4th of July, everybody, and let's go.